drag is obviously a really big deal when it comes to holding on to fish and landing them. And how you set your drag is based on a number of different variables. What type of equipment that you're using, the pound test line, the type of presentation, the fish you're fishing for. All these things come into play. So in this video, I want to walk through not only some examples of how you might set your drag with a spinning and bait casting application, but also how to make sure that you can get the most out of your drag for the longest period of time. All right, so let's jump into a good example of setting your drag for, let's say, walleye fishing. I'll use the example of snap jigging for walleyes. This is done primarily with a spinning reel, or that's how I do it most of the time. And in this situation, I'm setting the drag pretty tight, meaning that the line is not slipping very much at all. So when I'm working a jig really fast, I'm snapping it. When I'm ripping that jig, there's no slippage on the drag, and when I hit a fish, a lot of times the drag doesn't slip either. I would simply adjust the drag as I was fighting the fish, because if I have it set too loose with that single hook application, a lot of times I would go to set the hook and the drag is slipping and I'm not getting good hook penetration. Now, if I was fishing smallmouth bass, for example, with light wire treble hooks on a jerkbait, which I love to do that technique on a spinning rod with braided line, I'm setting the drag a lot looser, and that's just simply because of the diameter of the hook, the type of the hook, and the way that the fish tend to hit it. Both examples are with the fish basically hitting on a slack line, meaning that if I'm snap jigging, oftentimes a walleye is going to bite when the bait is falling or it's on the bottom, and I will not know the fish is there until I come back and set the hook. Same thing with the jerk bait. Snap, snap, snap. The bait's sitting still. When I go to jerk again, when I pull, I know the fish is there. Now with light wire treble hooks, if your drag is set too tight, what happens a lot of times is when you go to snap again to get the bait to hunt or dance, when you're hitting it on slack line, a lot of times on a tight drag, those hooks will cut or tear, and you won't get the purchase that you need, or you'll straighten those light wire hooks out. So in that situation, when I'm hitting the bait on slack, a lot of times I might just get like one click out of the drag, and when I set the hook on a fish, and I go to snap again, the drag just slides right out. And it seems that way I'm able to hold on to fish really well. And throughout the fight with really any fishing situation on spinning gear, I may have to adjust the drag depending on what the fish wants to do. Now, this might be a little bit of bragging, but this is awesome. I'm here to tell you that Daiwa's drags are absolutely insane, and they will help you catch more fish. This is an example I like to show people on how smooth they are. Daiwa drags don't give you that zip tight. They're smooth throughout. It's absolutely amazing. So check this out. I reeled up a little bit of line. I'm going to put my finger on the spool. I'm going to load the rod, put the hook on the hanger. Now watch this. Can you hear that? Smooth all the way basically through this power stroke. That will, I guarantee you, help you land more fish, especially on tight line. Now let's move over to bait casting equipment. A little bit different here. Most of the time when I'm fishing bait casters, I have the drag basically locked, meaning I have it set as tight as it's possibly going to go. I'll use an example of muskie fishing here. I love to muskie fish, and if you're making really long casts with heavy baits, large diameter hooks, to be able to drive those hooks home, you can't have drag slippage. So I'm setting the drag as tight as it goes while I'm fishing, and when I get bit, I'm able to set the hook, and you just need to be aware as you're fighting the fish, you may have to use the drag as you're fighting the fish, loosen or tighten. So get your hand familiar with how that star drag is set up on the side to adjust the drag, or what I'm doing every time I'm fighting a muskie is using the free spool option where I'm pushing the button and using my thumb then basically for a drag to let fish take line when it needs to. But as a backup, especially if a fish bites close to the boat and I get tight, I'm going to back that drag off a little bit so that if a fish does go on a quick bolting run, the drag's able to peel out really easily. So to make sure that you don't have line failure, you don't tear hooks, you don't straighten hooks, and to make these drags as smooth as possible for as long as possible, the real secret is simply backing off the drags when they're not in use. So if you can get in the habit of, when you're done fishing for the day, is just to take and loosen the drags on both your spinning and your bait casting reels, and also make sure that when they're going away for storage for a long period of time, you don't have these things cranked down, because that's going to warp those drag washers. And if you have warped drag washers, that's when you're going to start to get that drag that's not consistent, where it's going, it's tight, it's going, it's tight, it's going, it's tight. So loosening your drag when it's not in use will maintain your drags on these reels for long periods of time to come. I'm telling you, if you haven't fished with Daiwa's reels and you want to experience first-class drag systems, they're legit.